Everyone, I'm Michelle with Next Chapter Counseling. I got a question from someone this week that asked me, Michelle, if I don't have much in common with my partner, can our relationship still work? And this is an interesting question to ask because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there when it comes to how much you're quote unquote supposed to have in common with a partner. I think a lot of people would believe that the more you have in common, the better. But I'm here today to address a common myth, which is exactly what I said just there. People assume that the more similar you are in interests and tastes and hobbies and things you enjoy, that you're going to be a more successful relationship. And it's actually not true. So today I'm going to talk about the things that it's okay if you and your partner don't have in common, but also the things that you do want to make sure you're on the same page about so that you can have a successful long-term relationship. So, first and foremost, I want to address that myth of, me and my partner should have a lot in common. That's what it takes to have a successful relationship, is being similar and liking the same things. Nope. There are plenty of couples out there who have very little in common in terms of hobbies and interests and things like that. They might like completely different foods. They might like completely different movies or TV shows. They might like to spend their time in completely different ways. And however, they can make their relationship work really well. So, what happens here is that a lot of times when we're looking at forming relationships, and I mean forming any kind of relationships, getting to know coworkers, friends, and of course, potential romantic partners, we first look to these types of things. We want to find out what are those things we have in common with someone. Oh, do we like the same foods? Do we like the same movies? Do we have the same favorite color, for example? Do we have the same favorite animal? Whatever it is, that tends to be a starting point for a lot of people because it feels good in conversation to be able to go, oh, mint chocolate chip is my favorite ice cream flavor too. Or like, yeah, blue is my favorite color also. It feels good to find those things in common. So we look out for those things, even if we're not explicitly asking those questions. That's what we try to find out about someone initially. But those things don't really indicate if you are going to be a compatible match with this person as a romantic partner. So, especially with online dating, this is a common thing people look at when they're looking at profiles. They scroll through someone's profile and they're trying to see, well, what do we have in common? Do they like the same things that I like? But really, that can be a big mistake to make because that's not going to be an indicator of long-term success in your relationship. What is going to be making sure that you guys do have common life goals and values. So that's the first thing that I recommend is, don't get me wrong, while it's convenient and it can make things easier to agree on where to go out to eat or what movie to go see with your partner because you naturally happen to like the same things. That's convenient. It doesn't necessarily point to your relationship being successful long term. So don't worry if you don't have much in common with your partner in that realm. Where I do want you to think about is, like I just said, life goals and values. That's where you do want to make sure you have some things in common with your partner. So to illustrate this, when I was growing up, my dad always told me that it was important to make sure you had 3 big things in common with the person that you decided to marry or spend your life with. So the 3 things that my dad said is that it's important that you are on the same page when it comes to kids, money, and religion. That's what my dad recommended. And even though you may not need to be in common with all 3 of those things, trust me, if you are, it's going to be hopefully smoother sailing ahead for your relationship. And I want to talk a little bit about why that is. So, with the idea of life goals that I mentioned, what I mean by that is that you and your partner do want to make sure that you are on similar life paths. Sometimes I talk with clients about how maybe them and their partner were on the same path for a little while, but now one of them's going over here, one of them's going over here. So what's happening with that? Well, a lot of times it comes down to having different life goals. It's important that in a relationship, you and your partner talk about and continue talking about, where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? What individually do you want to achieve or do or experience? And how in line is that with what your partner wants to experience for themselves? If you guys have completely different answers here, it's going to be tough to maintain your relationship. If, let's say, you grew up in a small town and you've always seen yourself just continuing to live there, you have no desire to uproot your life and move anywhere else, but your partner says that they want to live in Europe, that may be an issue. It's a completely different life goal than yours. This is what my dad was talking about when he talked about kids, and he brings up a good point. Most people have a pretty clear idea for themselves of if they see kids in their future or not. And if you and your partner are different on that, it could potentially be a deal breaker because you're on different paths when it comes to the decision to have children. So there could be lots of things like this that come up in your relationship, but those are two big ones. Where are we going to live? Do we want to have kids? But also figuring out what you each want to do for careers and how similar that is in terms of just building the life that you want to build. Again, these life goals don't have to be identical to one another, but they should hopefully be fairly similar so that you have some things in common. The second thing I mentioned was values, and this is what my dad hit on when he talked about having money and religion as things in common. When I talk about values, there's lots of different definitions out there about what it means to have values, but what I think of it as is just asking yourself, what's important to me? What do I prioritize in my life? How do I spend my time and energy? What am I passionate about? Things like that. Just asking yourself some questions to get thinking. Now, going with my dad's examples of money and religion, chances are if you and your partner belong to a similar religion, like you have the same religious beliefs, you already likely probably value some similar things. You probably have certain values around sex, drug and alcohol use, family. There are certain things that come with belonging to a certain religion that mean you probably already have some stuff in common. Though it's important to not make any assumptions and to still talk about, well, where are we similar, where are we different? But that's an area where, again, if you have similar religious beliefs, you probably have similar values. My dad brought up money because, as it's talked about a lot, that can be a really common cause of conflict in relationships. And also, what do you value about money? Do you value saving or spending more often? So there's lots of questions to ask yourself when it comes to what you and your partner each value and how that impacts your relationship. How much do each of you value spending time with family and friends? How much do each of you value travel? How much do each of you value spending time together versus time apart? How much do you value work versus leisure time? There's lots of things where you guys can figure out, okay, do we have this in common or are we different on this? And again, I still believe you don't have to have 100% similar values, but the more you have in common, the more likely your relationship is going to have smoother sailing in the future. And when you hit rocky waters, the more likely you're going to be able to come back on track, because you have that as a core foundation for your relationship. So these are all just important things to talk about and to make sure, again, that you have some overlap, and that if you and your partner are really different on an area that's important to you, it is time to really figure out, are we going to be compatible, and how could this affect us down the line? How can we deal with this issue now in our relationship before it becomes a problem so that we can work through it? If you have a question for me, email it to me at nextchapter.michelle@gmail.com. See you guys next week. Bye.